That night, while my father snored in the next room, my stepmother slapped me hard enough to shake the walls. She assumed she could cry the next morning and erase the violence like always. However, she forgot that my father had given me a microphone, which was recording silently under my bed. 7 years later, I sit across from them with my phone. One tap, and the entire town will hear the truth they chose to ignore. My name is Cambria Holt, and I am 26 years old. I currently make my living in Denver as an audio engineer and a producer for a mid-sized podcast network, where I spend my days cleaning up the messy, stuttering noises of other people until they sound like the truth. But right now, I am sitting in the living room of the house I grew up in, located in the suffocatingly small town of Maple Ridge, Ohio. The air in here is thick and still, smelling faintly of lemon furniture polish and the distinct, metallic tang of heart medication. It feels less like a family gathering and more like a sentencing hearing. I am sitting on the stiff, floral-patterned armchair that my mother bought 3 months before she died. Across from me, on the beige sofa that has begun to sag in the middle, sits my father, David Holt. Next to him, with a hand possessively resting on his knee, is my stepmother, Vanessa. To my left, perched on folding chairs like an audience waiting for a curtain call, are Mrs. Gable and Mr. Henderson, our neighbors of 20 years, and dominating the coffee table in the center is Mr. Kendrick, the family attorney, who is currently shuffling through a stack of documents that will effectively erase my existence from this family. The only sound in the room is the dry rustle of paper and the heavy, wet breathing of my father. My father looks terrible. He's only 55, but he looks 70. His skin has taken on the color of old parchment, gray and translucent, and his hands, which used to be steady enough to solder a circuit board without a magnifying glass, are trembling in his lap. He is heavily medicated. I can see it in the glazed, watery look in his eyes, the way his head lolls slightly to the left, as if the muscles in his neck have given up the ghost. He is physically present, but the man who raised me, the man who taught me how to listen to the rhythm of a train on the tracks, is gone. Vanessa, on the other hand, looks radiant in a practiced, dim way. She is wearing a soft pastel cardigan and modest slacks, the uniform of the grieving, supportive wife. She keeps patting my father's hand, a rhythmic, soothing motion that looks affectionate to the neighbors, but looks like ownership to me. Every time she touches him, I see her eyes dart toward the paperwork on the table. She is calculating. She is waiting. She thinks she has won. Mr. Kendrick clears his throat, a dry hacking sound that breaks the silence. We are here to finalize the transfer of the deed and the update to the living trust. In plain English, we are here to sign the papers that give Vanessa everything: the house, the land, the savings accounts, and the power of attorney. Mr. Kendrick adjusts his glasses and looks at me with a pity that feels condescending. Now, regarding the distribution of assets, he says, his voice droning like a low-frequency hum. As discussed, David has expressed his wish to ensure Vanessa is provided for, given her role as his primary caregiver. The deed to the property at 412 Maple Avenue will be transferred to Vanessa Holt solely. The primary savings account at First National will also be transferred to her name to facilitate medical payments. I keep my face perfectly still. I learned how to do this years ago. You do not give the microphone any feedback. You keep your levels flat. However, Mr. Kendrick continues, looking at a smaller, insignificant piece of paper at the bottom of the stack, there is a stipulation for you, Cambria. David has set aside a sum of $5,000, payable upon his passing, as a gesture of affection. $5,000. It is an insult. It is not even enough to cover the therapy bills I have paid over the last 7 years. But the money is not the point. Vanessa knows it is not the point. She looks up at me then, her eyes wide and shimmering with fake tears. We just want to make sure you are okay, Cambria, Vanessa says softly, her voice trembling just enough to sell the performance to Mrs. Gable, who is nodding sympathetically in the corner. We know how hard it has been for you out there in Denver, struggling to find your footing. Your father and I agreed that the house is just too much burden for a young woman. I promised him I would take care of everything so you could be free. I almost laugh. The audacity is breathtaking. She is painting a picture of me as the wayward, unstable daughter who needs to be protected from responsibility, while she plays the martyr who sacrifices herself to inherit a $300,000 property. I look at my father. "Dad?" I say. He blinks, turning his head slowly toward me. It takes him a full 5 seconds to focus on my face. "Cammy," he whispers. His voice is a husk. "Is it done? Did we sign?" "Not yet, David," Vanessa coos, squeezing his knee harder. "Mr. Kendrick is just explaining things to Cambria, so she does not feel left out. We want everyone to be happy, right?" "Right," my father mumbles, his eyes drifting back to the carpet. "Happy, just want peace." Peace, that is all he ever wanted. That is why he looked away when she started changing the furniture. That is why he put on his headphones when she started screaming at me about the electric bill. And that is why he took the sleeping pills that night, 7 years ago, leaving me alone in the house with her. I look around the room. The wallpaper is different now. A generic beige that replaced the floral pattern my mother loved. The photos on the mantel are all of Vanessa and my half-brother, who is currently at a soccer camp, conveniently absent for this ugly business. But the structure of the house is the same. The hallway stretching out behind the sofa leads to the bedrooms. The last door on the left was mine. I stare at that door. It is closed now, but in my mind, it is wide open. I can feel the cold draft that used to come under the frame. I can feel the vibrations of footsteps approaching. I remember the texture of the carpet against my cheek. They think I came back to Ohio to beg. They think I am here to fight for a slice of the inheritance, to cry about fairness, to make a scene that they can gossip about at church next Sunday. Vanessa has prepared for that. She has her speeches ready. She has the neighbors here as witnesses to prove that I am unreasonable and aggressive, while she is calm and rational. She has prepared for a temper tantrum. She has not prepared for a deposition. I am not the same 19-year-old girl who ran out of this house with a backpack and a bruised face. I am a professional. I work with sound. I understand that sound is the only thing in the world that does not lie. People lie. Memories fade. Joyful photographs can be staged. But a waveform is a waveform. A frequency is a frequency. If you have the recording, you have the truth. I reach into my jacket pocket. My hand closes around my phone. It is cool and smooth metal. "If there are no objections," Mr. Kendrick says, uncapping a heavy, expensive-looking fountain pen. He pushes the thick document toward my father. "David, you need to sign here, here, and here. Vanessa, you will sign below him as the beneficiary." The room seems to contract. The air pressure drops, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I can hear the scratch of the pen tip hovering over the paper. I can hear the wet click of Vanessa swallowing in anticipation. "Wait," I say. It is not a shout. It is a flat, calm command. It cuts through the room more effectively than a scream. "Mr. Kendrick pauses, looking annoyed. "Ms. Holt, I understand this is emotional, but—" "I do not want the money," I say, keeping my eyes locked on Vanessa. Her smile falters for a fraction of a second, the corners of her mouth twitching. "I do not want the house. You can keep the furniture. You can keep the car. You can keep the life insurance." "Then what is the problem? Cambria?" Vanessa asks, her voice sharpening. The mask is slipping, just a millimeter. "Why are you making this hard on your father? Look at him. He is exhausted." "I am not here for the assets," I continue, standing up slowly. My legs feel solid. My heartbeat is steady. "I am here to return something, a memory. You see, everyone in this room seems to have a very specific version of what happened the night I left home 7 years ago. The story, as I understand it, is that I was an out-of-control teenager who pushed her stepmother, tried to extort money, and then ran away when I did not get my way. Mrs. Gable shifts uncomfortably in her chair. That is exactly the story Vanessa told her. But stories change, I say, pulling my phone out of my pocket. Sound does not. I walk forward and place the phone on the center of the coffee table, right on top of the legal documents. The screen is black for a moment, reflecting the ceiling fan. Then, I tap the screen. The interface of my audio app lights up. It is simple. A black background with a single blue waveform waiting to be played. The file name is bright white text against the dark background. Vanessa. 01:47 a.m. Vanessa stares at the phone. Her face goes pale. The color draining away so fast it looks like a light switch was flipped. She recognizes the date in her head. She recognizes the time. "What is this?" Mr. Kendrick asks, frowning. "Ms. Holt, we are in the middle of a legal proceeding." "This is the only piece of evidence that matters," I say. 7 years ago, my father gave me a USB microphone to practice for a podcast I wanted to start. He told me to record my thoughts. He told me to tell stories. I do not think he realized that I kept that mic running all night. Every night, under my bed. I caught a lot of things. The wind, the train passing at 3 a.m., and one specific conversation that happened while he was asleep in the other room. "Take that off the table," Vanessa hisses. Her voice is no longer sweet. It is low and venomous. "David, tell her to stop. She is trying to manipulate you." My father looks at the phone. He is blinking rapidly. He looks from the phone to me, and for the first time in years, I see a spark of genuine recognition in his eyes, and fear. "You said I imagined it," I say to the room, addressing the neighbors now. "You told the whole town I was crazy. You told Dad I was a liar. You beat me. And then you woke up the next morning and made pancakes like nothing happened." "I never touched you," Vanessa shouts. Standing up, the chair scrapes loudly against the floor. "You are a liar. You are sick." "If I am a liar," I say, my finger hovering over the play button, "then you have nothing to worry about. It is just a recording of a quiet night, right? Just wind and silence." The room is deadly silent now. The tension is so high it feels like a physical weight pressing down on our chests. Mr. Kendrick looks confused and alarmed. The neighbors are staring at Vanessa, whose chest is heaving. I look at my father. "You are about to sign your life away to a woman who convinced you that your daughter abandoned you. But before you put that pen to that paper, you need to know exactly who is sleeping in the bed next to you." I lean in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that carries to every corner of the room. "If everyone is ready to sign, then I assume everyone is ready to listen to a night that you all pretended to forget. To understand why I am sitting in this living room with a weaponized recording on my phone. You have to understand the silence that came before the noise. You have to understand the 2 winters that followed my mother's death, when the world shrank down to just me and my father, huddled together in a house that suddenly felt 3 sizes too big. I was 10 years old when my mother finally let go. The cancer had been a slow, greedy visitor, taking her piece by piece until there was nothing left but the hospital bills stacked on the kitchen counter. After the funeral, the silence in our house in Maple Ridge was heavy. It was not a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of snow that muffled everything. For the first 6 months, we operated like 2 astronauts stranded on a desolate planet. We developed a routine born of survival and grief. My father, who had always been a man of few words, became even quieter. He worked long shifts at the automotive assembly plant, coming home with grease permanently etched into the lines of his knuckles and the smell of industrial coolant clinging to his jacket. But he tried. God, he tried so hard back then. We did not have much money. The medical debts were a rising tide that threatened to drown us, so we lived on the basics. Dinner was almost always instant noodles or discounted pizza that we heated up in the oven until the crust was like cardboard, but we ate it together, every single night. He would sit at the small round table in the kitchen, still in his work boots, and ask me about school. He would listen to me talk about the mundane drama of the 5th grade with a seriousness that made me feel important. During those long Ohio winters, when the wind howled off the plains and rattled the loose window frames, our house became a workshop. My father could not fix the hole in his heart. So he fixed everything else. He taught me how to use a soldering iron before I learned how to use a curling iron. We spent weekends sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by the guts of broken appliances he had salvaged from the neighbors or the dump. "Look here, Cambria," he would say, pointing a calloused finger at a circuit board. "The connection is broken. That is why the signal cannot get through. You have to bridge the gap." I would watch him melt the silver solder, the thin wisp of smoke rising like incense. We fixed toasters. We fixed radios. We fixed an old television that only played in black and white. There was a comfort in it, a logic that the rest of the world lacked. If something was broken, you opened it up, found the disconnect, and mended it. I thought, in my naive 10-year-old mind, that maybe we could do the same thing to ourselves. If we just stayed close enough, if we just kept working, we could solder our little 2-person family back together. It was during these repair sessions that he noticed I had a habit of listening. I did not just hear things, I collected them. I was fascinated by the noises the house made when it thought no one was listening. The groan of the water pipes settling at midnight, the rhythmic clacking of the freight train that passed 2 miles east of town every night at 3 a.m, the way the wind sounded different when it blew through the bare branches of the oak tree versus the pine tree. I had found an old, battered cassette recorder in a box of junk my mother had left behind. It was a cheap plastic thing, the kind used for dictation in the 90s, but to me, it was magic. I started carrying it everywhere. I recorded the rain hitting the metal gutters. I recorded the sound of my father's boots crunching on the gravel driveway when he came home. I recorded the sizzling sound of onions hitting a hot pan. My father never told me to stop. He never told me it was annoying. He would just watch me, a faint, sad smile touching his lips, as I held the microphone up to a purring cat or a boiling kettle. "You are capturing ghosts, Cammy," he said once, watching me tape the sound of a thunderstorm. "No," I told him seriously. "I am keeping it, so I do not forget." I think he understood that better than anyone. He was terrified of forgetting her voice. He had lost the only videotape we had of my mother in a move years ago, and the guilt of it ate at him, so he let me hoard my sounds. The turning point came on my 12th birthday. We were broke. I knew we were broke because I had seen him staring at the electricity bill with a look of sheer panic when he thought I was asleep. I had resigned myself to no gifts. Maybe just a cake from the grocery store bakery. But when I woke up that morning, there was a box wrapped in the funny pages of the newspaper sitting on the kitchen table. My father was drinking coffee, looking tired, but eager. "Open it," he said. Inside the box was not a toy or clothes. It was a USB microphone. It was not professional grade, nothing like the equipment I use now in my studio in Denver. But for a kid in Maple Ridge, it was NASA technology. Beside it was a pair of over-ear headphones that looked too big for my head. "The guy at the electronics store said this connects right to your laptop," my father explained, his hands moving nervously. "It is better than that tape recorder. Clearer. You can save the files forever." I put the headphones on. The world instantly dampened, the ambient noise fading away. "You keep recording, Cambria," he told me, his voice serious. "You make a voice diary. Record the world. Who knows? Maybe one day you will be a storyteller for the whole world to hear." That night, I set up my command center. I did not have a desk, so I used the floor under my bed. It was a tight squeeze, a dusty cave where I felt safe. I pushed the boxes of winter clothes aside and created a nest of pillows. I ran the cables behind the headboard. I set the microphone on a stack of books so it would not pick up the vibrations of the floor. That was the beginning. The space under my bed became my sanctuary. It was where I went to whisper my secrets, to cry where he could not hear me, and to listen. I started leaving the software running, watching the waveforms dance across the screen of my old laptop. I found comfort in the visual representation of sound. Even silence had a shape. For the next 2 years, we were a team. We were the dynamic duo of Maple Ridge. We developed traditions that felt ancient and sacred. On Friday nights, we would order a pepperoni pizza from the place on Main Street, and even though we could not afford extra toppings, It tasted like a feast. We would turn off all the lights in the living room and build a fort out of blankets and sofa cushions, sitting inside with a flashlight to read comic books or listen to the baseball game on the radio. "Us against the world, right, kid?" he would say, ruffling my hair. "Us against the world," I would repeat. But the world is heavy, and my father was carrying all of it on his shoulders. By the time I turned 13, the edges of our life were starting to fray. The shifts at the plant got longer. He started taking overtime, then double shifts. He would come home so exhausted that he could barely chew his food. The sparkle in his eyes when we fixed radios began to dim, replaced by a dull, gray fatigue. The medical bills from my mother's illness were not going away. They were gathering interest, spawning late fees, turning into menacing letters printed on pink paper that arrived in the mail every week. My father stopped talking about fixing things. He stopped asking about school. He would come home, collapse onto the sofa, and stare at the television without really seeing it. I tried to fill the silence. I would play him the recordings I made. Funny interviews with the stray dog down the street, a mock weather report I did during a blizzard. He would nod, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and say, "That is nice, honey. That is real nice." But he was drifting. The empty space on the sofa where my mother used to sit seemed to grow larger, colder. It became a black hole that was slowly sucking him in. I saw him looking at it when he thought I wasn't watching. I saw the loneliness eating him alive. I tried to be enough. I learned to cook better meals so he wouldn't have to eat instant noodles. I learned to sew buttons on his work shirts. I kept the house clean. I got straight A grades so he wouldn't have to worry about my future. I became a little adult, shrinking my own needs down to nothing so I wouldn't add to his burden. But a 13-year-old girl cannot be a wife. I could not be a partner. I could not help him carry the mortgage or the grief. The winter I turned 14 was the coldest on record. The snow piled up 4 feet high against the side of the house. One night, I was in my room, wearing the headphones, listening to the wind howl through the eaves. I had the gain turned up high on my microphone, catching the subtle creaks of the house settling in the frost. I heard the front door open and close. My father had stepped out onto the porch. I saw the waveform spike on my screen. Curious, I took off my headphones and crept to the window. My room was on the first floor, facing the front yard. I could hear voices. My father was talking to Mr. Henderson, our neighbor, who had come over to borrow a shovel. The cold air carried their voices clearly through the thin glass. "You look like hell." "David," Mr. Henderson said, the sound of a lighter flicking. The smell of cigarette smoke drifted through the cracks. "I feel like hell," my father replied. His voice sounded cracked, broken. "I am drowning. Jim, I am working 60 hours a week and I still cannot get ahead of the bills. And the house is falling apart." "You need help," Mr. Henderson said. "You cannot do this alone forever. It has been 4 years. You are a man. You have needs. And that girl, she needs a mother figure." My breath caught in my throat. I pressed my ear against the cold glass. "Cambria is a good kid," my father said defensively. "She takes care of herself." "She is a child," Mr. Henderson insisted. "She is growing up. She needs a woman to show her the ropes. And you need a partner. You need someone to help share the load. You are going to work yourself into an early grave. And then where will she be?" There was a long silence. All I could hear was the wind and the beating of my own heart. "I just want to rest," my father whispered. It was the most honest thing I had heard him say in years. "I am so tired of being alone. Jim, I cannot be the father and the mother anymore. I cannot be the provider and the homemaker. I am failing her. I look at her and I see her mother, and it breaks me every single day." "There is no shame in moving on," Mr. Henderson said. "There are women out there who would love to help you build a home. You just have to open the door." "Maybe," my father said. "Maybe you are right. She needs a woman in the house. I cannot just be me. I am not enough." I pulled away from the window and sank down onto the floor. I crawled under my bed, into the nest of pillows and cables. The microphone was still recording. The little red light was blinking in the darkness, like a steady, unblinking eye. I did not cry. I felt a strange, cold numbness spreading through my chest. I loved him so much. I saw how tired he was. I saw how his hands shook when he signed the checks. I saw the gray hair spreading at his temples. He thought he wasn't enough. He thought he was failing me. But the truth was, he just wanted to be saved. He wanted someone to come in and fix him, the way we used to fix the broken toasters. He wanted the loneliness to stop. And if the price of his happiness was bringing a stranger into our sanctuary, if the price of his rest was replacing the memory of my mother, then who was I to stop him? I lay there in the dark, listening to the hum of the laptop fan. "It is okay," I whispered to the dust bunnies under the bed, my voice being captured by the digital sensor. "I can handle it. As long as Dad is happy. I can take the cold. I can make myself smaller. I can be quiet." I did not know then that silence would be the most dangerous thing I could offer. I did not know that the help he was looking for would arrive wearing the perfume of vanilla and rotten intentions. I thought I was making a noble sacrifice for the person I loved most in the world. I closed my eyes and let the recording run, capturing the sound of a girl convincing herself that she did not matter, paving the way for the woman who would eventually try to erase her completely. Vanessa arrived in our lives like a season that comes too early and kills all the budding flowers with a sudden, deceptive frost. Her name was Vanessa, and she was everything my father was not. She was polished, vibrant, and smelled aggressively of vanilla and ambition. She was in her early 30s, managing a high-end nail salon and spa in the next town over, a place where women went to spend $300 to look like they did not have a care in the world. She entered our small, weather-beaten house on a Tuesday evening, carrying a pie that she claimed to have baked herself, though the crimping on the crust looked suspiciously like the work of a machine at the local supermarket. "You must be Cambria," she said, flashing a smile that showed off perfect, white teeth. "Your father has told me so much about you. He says you are an old soul." She leaned in to hug me, and I was enveloped in that cloud of synthetic vanilla perfume. It was thick and sweet, the kind of scent designed to mask everything underneath it, over her shoulder, as she squeezed me just a little too tightly. I saw her eyes darting around our living room. She was not looking at the family photos or the cozy clutter of our life. She was looking at the scuff marks on the baseboards. She was looking at the worn fabric of the armchair. She was looking at the house the way a developer looks at a tear-down property, calculating the cost of renovation versus the value of the land. My father, however, saw none of this. For the first time in 4 years, he had shaved on a Tuesday. He was wearing his best button-down shirt, the one he usually saved for church or weddings, and his eyes were bright. He looked 5 years younger. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath underwater and had finally broken the surface. Come in," he said, ushering her toward the kitchen. He pulled out a chair for her, a gesture I had not seen him do since my mother was alive. "Cambria, get Vanessa a glass of water, or maybe some tea? Do we have tea?" "Water is fine, David," she said, placing a manicured hand on his forearm. Her nails were painted a soft, non-threatening pink. "I am just happy to finally be here. You have such a cozy home." The word cozy sounded like an insult the way she said it. That first dinner was a masterclass in exclusion. They sat at the small round table, laughing about people I did not know and places I had never been. Vanessa told stories about her clients, funny anecdotes about difficult women demanding refunds for chipped polish, and my father laughed until his face turned pink. I stood at the sink, washing the dishes by hand because the dishwasher had broken 2 months ago and we had not had the money to fix it. From my vantage point at the sink, I watched them. I watched how she leaned into him, creating a physical barrier between their conversation and the rest of the room. I watched how my father's gaze was fixed entirely on her, as if she were the sun and he was a planet that had finally found its orbit. I realized, with a cold, sinking feeling in my gut, that I had been demoted. I was no longer the co-pilot. I was the stewardess. expected to clear the plates and stay out of the cockpit. In the first few months, Vanessa played the role of the modern stepmother to perfection. She did not try to be my mother, she tried to be my cool older sister. She bought me clothes that were nicer than anything I had ever owned, bringing home sweaters and jeans from the mall in Columbus. "Teenage years are so hard," she would say, sitting on the edge of my bed while I tried to do homework. "We girls have to stick together, right? If you ever want to talk about boys, or makeup, or anything, I am here. We can be friends." It sounded genuine. The neighbors certainly thought so. Mrs. Gable told me across the fence one afternoon, "You are so lucky. Cambria. Vanessa is trying so hard to make a nice home for you. She is a saint for taking on a teenager." But the mask only stayed on when there was an audience, when my father was at work, or when he was outside fixing the car. The temperature in the house would drop. One afternoon, I was in the living room, testing a new directional microphone I had bought with money saved from mowing lawns. I was recording the sound of the refrigerator compressor, trying to isolate the hum from the ambient traffic noise outside. Vanessa walked in, carrying a basket of laundry. She stopped and stared at me, her lip curling slightly. "Why do you do that?" she asked. Her voice was not sweet. It was flat and sharp. "Do what?" I asked, lowering the headphones. "That audio stuff, walking around with a microphone like a spy, it is weird. Cambria, it makes you look disturbed." "I like sound," I said defensively. "Dad says I have a talent for it." She laughed, a short, dry sound. "Your dad says that because he feels guilty that you do not have any real friends. He indulges you. But honestly, it creeps him out. He just does not want to hurt your feelings." The words hit me like a physical blow. My father had never said that. He had bought me the gear. He had built forts with me. But Vanessa spoke with such authority, such casual cruelty, that a seed of doubt planted itself in my chest. Was he just pretending? Was I the weird, burdensome daughter with the strange hobby? "If you want to make him happy," Vanessa continued, adjusting the laundry basket on her hip, "you should try doing something normal. Join a club. Put on some of those nice clothes I bought you instead of dressing like a stagehand at a funeral. You look gloomy. It brings the whole mood of the house down." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my microphone, feeling foolish and small. Then came the erasure. It started slowly, so slowly that my father did not even notice it happening. It began with reorganizing. Vanessa claimed that the house was too cluttered, that the dust was bad for my father's allergies. First, the throw pillows my mother had embroidered disappeared, replaced by stiff, beige cushions that scratched my skin. Then, the collection of ceramic frogs my mother had loved was moved from the mantel to a box in the closet. "It is just cleaner this way," Vanessa told my father, running her hand down his back. "A fresh start, for us." The breaking point for me was the hallway. For 6 years, a large framed photograph of my mother, my father, and me at a pumpkin patch had hung right outside the kitchen. It was the last professional photo we had taken before she got sick. In it, my mother was laughing, her hair windblown, looking vibrant and alive. I came home from school one day to find a piece of abstract art hanging in its place. It was a generic print of swirling gray and yellow shapes, something you would buy in the clearance section of a home goods store. My stomach dropped. I ran to the garage. There, stacked near the recycling bins, was a cardboard box marked MSC. Inside, face down, was the photo of my mother. The glass in the frame was cracked, a spiderweb fracture right over her smile. I marched back into the house, the frame clutched in my hands. Vanessa was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. "Where is Mom's picture?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Vanessa did not even look up from the cutting board. "Oh, you found it. I was moving things around. That frame was broken. Cambria, it was dangerous." "It wasn't broken this morning," I said. She turned to me then, knife in hand, her expression one of mild pity. "Things get old, sweetie. We cannot live in a museum. Your father gets so sad every time he walks down that hallway. Do you want him to be sad forever? Every time he sees her face, he remembers the pain. I am trying to help him heal. Why are you trying to keep him in the past?" She twisted the narrative so effortlessly. Suddenly, keeping my mother's photo on the wall was an act of cruelty toward my father, and removing it was an act of love. I did not know how to fight that kind of logic. I took the photo back to my room and hid it under my bed, right next to my microphone. She did the same thing with the neighbors. I heard her talking to Mrs. Gable on the front porch one afternoon while I was doing homework in the dining room. "Cambria is such a solitary creature," Vanessa sighed. "I try to include her, but she just shuts herself in that room. I think she likes the drama of being the lonely orphan. She is strong, though. She does not need much attention. She prefers to be left alone." I froze. She doesn't need much attention. That was exactly what my mother used to say to the nurses in the hospital when she was in pain. Trying to be brave. "I am fine. I don't need attention. Help the others." Vanessa had taken my mother's bravery and twisted it into an excuse to neglect me. She was telling the world that my isolation was a choice, not a consequence of her pushing me out. The final straw of that first year happened in November. The cold had returned, settling over Maple Ridge like a heavy gray blanket. I went to the coat closet to find my mother's old wool coat. It was a heavy navy blue pea coat that I had started wearing the previous winter. It was 3 sizes too big for me, but it smelled like her, like rain and lavender detergent. I wrapped myself in it when the days were hard. The hanger was empty. I searched the floor of the closet. I searched the laundry room. Nothing. Panic started to rise in my throat, a hot, acidic taste. I found Vanessa in the master bedroom, folding laundry on the bed that used to belong to my parents, but now looked entirely like hers, covered in a silky champagne-colored duvet. "Where's the blue coat?" I asked. "The heavy wool one." "Oh," she said lightly. "I did a donation run to the Salvation Army this morning. I cleared out a bunch of old stuff that nobody wears anymore. That coat was moth-eaten. Cambria. It was falling apart." "That was Mom's," I whispered. The air felt too thin to breathe. I wear it all the time." "It made you look homeless," she said, smoothing out a wrinkle in a towel. "I bought you that nice pink puffer jacket last week. Why don't you wear that? It is new. It is warm." "I want my coat back," I said, my voice rising. "You had no right. You had no right to touch her things." Vanessa sighed and sat down on the edge of the bed, patting the spot next to her. I did not move. "Cambria," she said, her voice dripping with that fake, poisonous honey. "You are being selfish. Do you know that? There are people out there who are actually freezing, people who have nothing. Your mother would want her coat to go to someone who needs it, not to rot in a closet because you are too stubborn to let go. Do not be a hoarder. It is ugly." She made me feel dirty for wanting to keep the one thing that still felt like a hug from my mother. She made my grief feel like a character flaw. I ran out of the room before she could see me cry, because I knew that if I cried, she would just tell my father that I was having another hormonal episode. That night, I stayed in my room. I did not go out for dinner, but I left my door cracked open just an inch, and I turned on my microphone. I needed to hear them. I needed to know if my father had noticed the coat was gone. He hadn't, or if he had, he didn't mention it. Instead, I heard the murmur of their voices from the kitchen table. I heard the shuffling of papers. "It just makes sense, David," Vanessa was saying. Her voice was low, reasonable, the voice of a partner solving a problem. "Right now, you have 3 different accounts, and the fees are eating you alive. Plus, it is so hard for me to do the grocery shopping and pay the utilities when I have to ask you for cash every time. If we merge the accounts, I can handle the bills. I can take that stress off your shoulders." "I don't know," my father said. He sounded tired. "I have always kept the savings separate. That money was, well, some of it was from the life insurance. And it is just sitting there, losing value against inflation," Vanessa countered. "Look, I am good with money. I manage the books at the spa. I can invest it for us, for our future, for Cambria's college. Do you trust me?" There was a long pause. The silence stretched out, heavy and agonizing. I gripped the edge of my desk, silently begging him to say no. "Don't give her the money, Dad." She threw away the coat. She broke the picture. "Don't give her the power." "Of course I trust you," my father said softly. "You have saved me, Ness. I was drowning before you came." "Then let me help you swim," she said. "Sign here. We will put everything in a joint account. One family, one pot, no more secrets." I crept to the top of the stairs and looked down. I saw them at the kitchen table under the warm glow of the pendant light. My father was holding a pen. Vanessa was standing behind him, her hands resting on his shoulders, massaging the tension from his neck. She looked like a predator soothing its prey before the final strike. He signed. I watched the ink flow onto the paper from 20 feet away. Vanessa smiled, and for a second, she looked up and caught my eye in the shadows of the hallway. She did not look away. She did not look guilty. She just smiled wider, a triumphant, terrifying expression that said, "This is mine now." I retreated to my room and crawled under my bed. I put on my headphones and listened to the recording I had just made. I listened to the sound of the pen scratching against the paper. It sounded like a lock clicking shut. It sounded like the end of the world. That was the night I realized Vanessa did not just want to be my father's wife. She did not just want to live in our house. She wanted to consume us. She wanted to digest our past, our memories, and our resources until there was nothing left of the Holt family but the version she decided to allow, and my father, in his grief and exhaustion, had just handed her the knife and fork. By the time I turned 18, the walls of the house on Maple Avenue had not just closed in, they had calcified. The air in the house was heavy with unsaid things and the smell of Vanessa's vanilla plug-in air fresheners, which she kept in every outlet to mask the scent of the old wood. I was suffocating, but I had found a small window of oxygen. I had been accepted into the audio production program at a community college in Columbus. It was not a prestigious university, but to me, it was the promised land. It meant a dorm room. It meant a studio with soundproofing that actually worked. It meant leaving Maple Ridge and, more importantly, leaving Vanessa. I remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands, feeling the texture of the paper, and thinking that it felt like a ticket out of prison. I showed it to my father first. He smiled, that tired, gray smile of his, and said he was proud. He said my mother would have been proud too. Then Vanessa walked into the room. She did not frown. She did not yell. She simply sighed, the long, suffering sigh of a woman who is the only adult in a room full of children. She took the letter from my hand and read it, her eyes scanning the tuition costs rather than the congratulations. "It is wonderful that you have dreams. Cambria," she said, placing the letter on the table as if it were a bill she refused to pay. "But we have to be realistic. Your father's heart medication has gone up 20% this year. The roof needs repairs. Do you really think it is fair to ask him to take out loans for a degree in, what is it, making noise?" "It is audio engineering," I said, my voice tight, "and I can get student loans. I can work." "And live in a dorm?" Vanessa laughed softly. "That is another $10,000 a year just for a bed. When you have a perfectly good one here, why would you waste the family's money like that? You are being selfish again, Cambria, just like with the coat." That word, selfish, it was her favorite weapon. She wielded it until I felt guilty for existing, guilty for taking up space, guilty for consuming oxygen. In the end, I did not go to Columbus. Vanessa convinced my father that it was unsafe for a young girl to be in the city alone, and financially irresponsible for the family. Instead, I enrolled in an online associate degree program. I stayed in my childhood bedroom, staring at a screen, listening to lectures through my headphones while Vanessa vacuumed loudly outside my door during my exams. "I am just cleaning," she would say when I asked her to stop. "Just because you are playing on the computer does not mean the house cleans itself." To pay for the tuition that Vanessa refused to let my father cover, I got a part-time job at a small recording studio in the next town over. It was barely a studio. It was a converted garage where local bands recorded demo tapes that went nowhere. My job was mostly coiling cables, fetching coffee, and scrubbing the bathroom. But I loved it. I loved the smell of ozone and stale cigarettes. I loved the sight of the mixing board with its hundreds of knobs and sliders. It felt like control. But independence had a price. The day I brought home my first paycheck, Vanessa was waiting for me at the kitchen table. She had a calculator and a stack of papers: the electric bill, the water bill, the grocery receipts, and the internet bill. "Welcome to the real world," she said, tapping the calculator. "Since you are a working woman now, it is time you contributed. You use the internet for your school, right? And you take long showers, and you eat our food." She slid a piece of paper toward me. She had calculated a rent and utility share that took exactly 70% of my paycheck. "This is almost all the money I made," I said, staring at the number. "I need to save for a car. I need to save for equipment. And we need to pay the mortgage," she countered. "Or do you expect your father to work himself to death while you hoard your cash? He is 53 years old, Cambria. He is tired. Are you going to help him? Or are you going to be a parasite?" I paid. I always paid. Every 2 weeks. I handed over an envelope of cash to her, and she would count it right in front of me, licking her thumb to separate the bills, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. It was financial strangulation disguised as a lesson in responsibility. When my father came home late from the plant, exhausted and gray-faced, I would try to talk to him. I wanted to tell him that she was taking my money, that she was charging me to live in my own home, but Vanessa was always faster. She would greet him with a hot meal and a cold beer, massaging his shoulders while she poisoned his mind. "Cambria was difficult today," she would whisper, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. "She threw a fit about contributing to the electric bill. I am trying so hard to teach her how to manage a household. David, but she is so entitled. She thinks money grows on trees. I just want her to be prepared for the future." And my father, too tired to fight, too tired to investigate, would just sigh. "She is lucky to have you, Ness. Thank you for looking out for her. I do not have the energy to argue with her." It was brilliant. She made herself the martyr and me the villain. If I complained, I proved her point that I was an ungrateful brat. If I stayed silent, she won. So I retreated. I went underground. My only escape was the podcast. It was a tiny project, hosted on a free server, under a pseudonym. I called it The Sound of Silence. I did not speak much in it, mostly. I used the microphone my father had given me, the one thing Vanessa could not take away because it was technically a gift, to record the textures of my life. I recorded the sound of the wind rattling the loose frame of my bedroom window. I recorded the distant, mournful horn of the freight train at 3 a.m. I recorded the hum of the refrigerator. I had maybe 40 listeners, but they were mine. One evening, Vanessa walked into my room without knocking. She never knocked. Privacy was a privilege I had apparently lost when I turned 18. She saw the waveform on my laptop screen. "Still doing that?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. She looked at my setup with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "Who listens to this? Other depressed teenagers?" "People who like to listen," I said, not taking off my headphones. "Does it pay?" she asked. "No." "Then it is a waste of time," she declared. "You are sitting here playing Radio Star while the dishwasher needs to be unloaded. One day, Cambria, you are going to realize that you cannot pay the heating bill with 50 listens from strangers on the internet." She reached over and closed my laptop lid, cutting off the recording midstream. "Go watch Leo. I need to go to the store." Leo. My half-brother. He was 6 years old then. A soft, round-faced boy who looked exactly like my father but had Vanessa's eyes. I did not hate Leo. It was impossible to hate him. He was just a child. But he was a living, breathing reminder of my displacement. Leo was the golden prince of the household. When Leo wanted a video game console, Vanessa found the money in the budget. When Leo made a mess, it was creative expression. When I left a book on the coffee table, it was clutter. That afternoon, while Vanessa went out, presumably to spend the rent money I had just given her, I was in the living room, supervising Leo. He was sitting on the rug, eating a chocolate ice cream cone that Vanessa had bought him. He was watching cartoons at full volume. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing the grout between the floor tiles with a toothbrush because Vanessa had decided they looked dingy. "Can you turn it down a little, Leo?" I asked. "I have a headache." "Mom said I can watch it loud," Leo said without looking away from the screen. "She said you have to clean the floor because you are the big sister." He did not say it with malice. He just repeated the facts as they had been presented to him. In his world, I was the servant. I was the Cinderella who paid rent. I looked at him, at the chocolate dripping onto his shirt, a stain I would inevitably have to wash out later, and I felt a surge of anger. Not at him, but at the architecture of this abuse. It was not physical. No one was hitting me. No one was starving me. But I was being erased. My time, my money, my future, and my dignity were being siphoned off drop by drop to fuel the comfort of Vanessa and her son. That was when I started the new recordings. I had read somewhere that gaslighting works because it makes you doubt your own memory. Vanessa was a master at rewriting reality. She would say something cruel in the morning, and by dinner, she would deny she had ever opened her mouth. She would tell me to do a chore, and when I did it, she would claim she told me to do something else and scold me for not listening. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like the floor was constantly shifting under my feet. So I decided to anchor myself. I started keeping the microphone running when I knew she was coming. I started carrying a small digital recorder in my pocket. The first time I played one back, I sat in my closet with the door shut and the lights off. It was a recording of an argument over the car keys. Audio playback. Vanessa: "I never said you could take the car to the studio today. You are lying. Cambria: "You always lie to get out of chores." Cambria: "You said it yesterday. You said if I finished the laundry, I could take the Honda." Vanessa: "I said no such thing. You are imagining things again. You are so unstable lately. Maybe you need to see a doctor." Listening to it in the dark, I felt a cold chill, but also a strange relief. I was not crazy. Her voice was sharp, condescending, and undeniably clear. She had said I could take the car. I remembered it, and the audio proved it. I did not use the recordings to confront her. I knew that would be useless. She would just accuse me of entrapment or find a way to twist it. I used them for me. I used them to keep my sanity intact. I was building a library of truth in a house built on lies. But the vice was tightening. Vanessa started restricting my access to the car more frequently, making me late for work, jeopardizing the one job I had. She started intercepting my mail. She controlled the food in the pantry, commenting on how much I ate, asking if I was sure I needed a second serving of pasta given that I didn't do much all day. The breaking point of that year came on a Tuesday night. My father was asleep. He had started taking sleeping pills because the stress of work and the peacekeeping at home was keeping him awake. I was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water. Vanessa came in. She was wearing a silk robe, looking every inch the mistress of the house. She poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter, watching me. "You know," she said casually, swirling the red liquid in the glass, "you are making this very hard on yourself." "Making what hard?" I asked, gripping my glass. "Life," she said. "You fight me on everything. You sulk. You cling to this house like a barnacle. You know, most girls your age have moved on. They have boyfriends. They have lives." "I am trying to save money to leave," I said. "But you take it all." She laughed. "I am taking what is owed to the family. But let us be honest. Cambria, you are not staying here because of money. You are staying because you think he needs you. You think you are protecting him from me." I said nothing. She had read my mind with terrifying accuracy. She took a sip of wine and stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a low, intimate whisper that made the hair on my arms stand up. "He loves you, sure," she said, But he is a weak man. He loves peace more than he loves justice. And right now, you are the noise in his life. I am the peace." She set the glass down on the counter with a sharp clink. "And here is the reality. Sweetie, everything in this house is in his name. And who do you think holds the pen when he is too shaking to sign? Me. Who sorts his pills? Me. She leaned in until I could smell the wine on her breath, mixing with that cloying vanilla perfume. "In this house, your voice only exists because he pities you. You are a ghost he keeps around out of guilt. But he is not going to live forever. His heart is weak, and if he gets sick, or if he goes, you are going to have to learn how to be very, very quiet, because without him, you are nothing here." She patted my cheek, 2 sharp little taps that felt like a slap, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing in the fluorescent hum of the refrigerator light. I went back to my room. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely plug in my microphone. I crawled under my bed, pulled the headphones over my ears, and hit record. I did not speak. I just breathed. I recorded the sound of my own terrified breathing for 45 minutes, just to prove that I was still alive, just to prove that I was still there. I knew then that this was not just a difficult living situation. This was a war, and I was losing. I needed a weapon. And as I lay there in the dust, looking at the red, blinking light of the interface, I realized I was already holding one. I just had to wait for the right moment to pull the trigger. 19 is a dangerous age. You are too old to be a child who can hide behind a parent's leg, but you are too young and too broke to simply walk out the door and build a fortress of your own. I was 19, attending my first year of community college, and living in a state of cold warfare within the walls of the house on Maple Avenue. The atmosphere in the house had shifted from passive aggression to active hostility. Vanessa was no longer content with just making me feel unwelcome. She wanted me gone, but she needed me gone on her terms, which meant she needed me to look like the villain who abandoned the family, not the victim who was pushed out. We fought about everything. We fought about the tuition money my father had promised me years ago, which had mysteriously vanished into home renovations. We fought about my schedule at the studio, which she claimed disrupted the peaceful rhythm of her household. We fought about the fact that I existed. It was a friend from an online audio forum who gave me the idea. Her username was Fader Queen, and we had never met in person, but she knew more about my life than the neighbors did. "You are losing your mind because you have no proof," she typed to me one night while I was crying in front of my screen. "Gaslighting works because it relies on your memory against theirs. Stop relying on memory. Audio does not hallucinate. Audio does not lie. Put a mic in your room. Leave it on. Catch the ghosts." It seemed paranoid at first. It seemed like something a spy would do. Not a daughter. But desperation makes you do strange things. I dug out the old USB microphone my father had given me for my 12th birthday. It was scratched and the stand was a little wobbly, but the diaphragm was still sensitive. I cleared a space under my bed, pushing aside the boxes of winter clothes and old textbooks. I set the mic on top of a thick history book to dampen the vibrations from the floor. I ran the cable up the back of the bed frame and plugged it into my laptop, which sat on my nightstand. I downloaded a simple, low-resource recording software and set it to record on a 24-hour loop, saving files in 6-hour chunks. Every night before I went to sleep, I would reach down and check the connection. I would tap the bed frame lightly and watch the green bar on the screen jump, confirming that the ear was open. It became my ritual. It was my insurance policy against insanity. The night it happened started like any other Tuesday, with the heavy, oppressive silence of a storm waiting to break. My father came home from the plant looking like a ghost. His skin was gray, and his hands were trembling so badly he could barely hold his fork during dinner. He had been working double shifts again to pay for the new landscaping Vanessa had insisted upon. "I cannot do this tonight," he murmured, pushing his plate away. "My chest feels tight. I am just going to take a pill and sleep." Vanessa was instantly at his side, cooing and fussing, playing the role of the concerned nurse. "Of course, David, you go to rest. I will handle the cleanup. I will handle everything. You just sleep." She gave him his sleeping pill with a glass of water. I watched him swallow it. I watched the relief wash over his face, not just because of the medicine, but because sleep meant he did not have to deal with the tension in the room. He was checking out. He was leaving me alone with her. "Good night, Dad," I said. "Night, Cammy," he whispered. He did not look at me. He walked down the hallway, and I heard his bedroom door click shut. The moment the door closed, the temperature in the kitchen dropped 10 degrees. Vanessa turned to the sink and started clattering the dishes with unnecessary force. I stood up to help, picking up a stack of plates. "Leave it," she snapped. "You will just break them. You are clumsy when you are sullen." "I am helping," I said, keeping my voice steady. She spun around, water dripping from her yellow rubber gloves. "You want to help? Pay the full rent this month. Or better yet, move out so we can give your room to my cousin who is coming to stay for the summer. She actually helps around the house." I froze. "What cousin? You never said anything about a cousin." "She is coming next month," Vanessa said casually, turning back to the sink. "She needs a place to stay while she looks for work. We figured you would be gone by then, or at least, you could sleep on the sofa. It is not like you need privacy for anything important." Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap, but a quiet, structural failure. "No," I said. Vanessa stopped scrubbing. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, my voice shaking slightly. "I am not sleeping on the sofa. This is my room. This is my house. I am not a guest you can shuffle around. I am his daughter." Vanessa laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that bounced off the tiled walls. "Oh, honey, you really do not get it, do you? This is not your house. This house belongs to the people who pay for it, and last I checked, you are just a drain." "I pay rent," I shouted. "I pay you 70% of everything I make. I am not a free maid for you to order around." "Lower your voice," she hissed, stepping closer to me. "You will wake him. Maybe he should wake up." I stepped back, my back hitting the refrigerator. "Maybe he should hear how you talk to me when he is not in the room. Maybe he should know that you are trying to kick me out of the only home I have ever known." Vanessa's eyes went wide, but not with fear, with rage, pure, unadulterated rage. She pulled off the rubber gloves and threw them into the sink with a wet slap. "You think you are so smart," she whispered. "You think you can tattle on me? Go ahead, wake him up. He is drugged to the gills. Cambria, he won't even remember you were here in the morning." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I needed to get away from her. I walked fast down the hallway toward my room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I heard her footsteps behind me, fast, heavy. "Do not walk away from me when I'm talking to you," she yelled. I reached my door and tried to close it, but she slammed her hand against the wood, pushing it open. She stepped into my room, invading the one square of safety I had left. "Get out," I said, backing up until my legs hit the edge of my bed. "Get out of my room." Vanessa kicked the door shut behind her. The sound was loud, a definitive thud that sealed us in. "You need to learn your place," she said. Walking toward me, she looked different. The mask of the sweet, suburban stepmother was completely gone. Her face was twisted, ugly, with contempt. "You think because your mother died here that you own the place? You are nothing. You are a remnant, a leftover." "Stop it," I said. Tears were stinging my eyes now. "Why do you hate me? I never did anything to you." "You exist," she spat. "You stand there with your mother's face and you make him feel guilty. You are a constant reminder of everything he wants to forget, and you are in my way." "I am telling him," I said, my voice trembling. "Tomorrow, I am telling him everything, about the money, about the cousin, about how you treat me." "Go ahead," she challenged, stepping right into my personal space. I could smell the wine on her breath. "Tell him, and I will tell him that you pushed me. I will tell him you were hysterical. I will tell him you threatened to hurt Leo. Who do you think he will believe? The sick, tired old man who just wants peace, Or the wife who takes care of him? She leaned in close, her eyes drilling into mine. Don't forget, Cambria, everything stands in his name, and your father, he stands with whoever makes his life easiest, and that is not you. I am moving out, I sobbed. I am leaving. You win. Just leave me alone. You aren't going anywhere until I say you are, she said. You owe us for this month. I tried to push past her to get to the door. Move, I said. I put my hand on her shoulder to move her aside. It was not a shove. It was a desperate attempt to escape. But she reacted as if I had stabbed her. Don't you touch me, she screamed. And then she swung. It was not a clumsy flail. It was a sharp, calculated slap across the left side of my face. The sound was sickeningly loud, a wet, sharp crack that seemed to echo in the small room. The force of it took me by surprise. I stumbled back. My feet tangled in the rug. I fell backward, my shoulders slamming hard against the wooden post of my bed frame. Pain exploded in my arm and radiated up my neck. I gasped. The air knocked out of my lungs. I lay there on the floor, looking up at her. My cheek was burning. My ear was ringing. For a second, Vanessa looked shocked. She stared at her own hand, then at me. But the shock did not turn into regret. It turned into justification. You made me do that, she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. You attacked me. I was defending myself. I touched my cheek. It felt hot and swollen. I looked at her, and I realized that the line had been crossed. The invisible barrier that separates a difficult family from a dangerous one had just been shattered. You hit me, I whispered. I disciplined you, she corrected, straightening her blouse. Since your father is too weak to do it. She looked down at me with pure disdain. Clean yourself up, she said. And if you say a word to him tomorrow, remember what I told you. I will make sure you never see a dime of help from this family again. Let's see who he believes in the morning. She turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence rushed back into the room, heavy and ringing. I lay on the floor for a long time. My shoulder throbbed. My face felt like it was on fire. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I could hear the distant sound of the television being turned on in the living room. She was going back to her show. She had just assaulted me, and she was going to watch a sitcom. Slowly, painfully, I rolled over. I crawled toward my nightstand. I reached up and pulled my laptop down onto the floor with me. The screen was dim, but the application was still running. I looked at the interface. A bright blue waveform was scrolling across the black background. I scrolled back. I saw the spike. It was a jagged, violent vertical line in the middle of the flat recording. I put my headphones on. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the ear cups. I hit play. I heard the door slam. I heard her voice, clear and venomous. You are a remnant, a leftover. I heard my own voice, thin and terrified. And then I heard it. The slap. It sounded different on the recording than it had in my head. In my head, it was full of emotion and shock. On the recording, it was just physics. It was the sound of flesh hitting flesh. It was followed by the heavy thud of my body hitting the bed frame, and then the silence, and then her voice. You made me do that. I stopped the playback. I sat there in the dark, holding the laptop to my chest like a shield. I was crying, but they were silent tears. I did not make a sound. I did not want to give her the satisfaction of hearing me sob. That recording was not just a file. It was not just data. It was the end of my childhood. It was the end of my hope that my father would save me. He was asleep in the other room, drugged into oblivion, while his wife beat his daughter. But the microphone was awake. I looked at the blinking red light of the recording indicator. It was still running. It was still watching. That was not just the sound of a slap. That was the sound of the last boundary in my heart breaking. I wiped the tears from my face and saved the file. I named it simply, Vanessa. 01:47 a.m. I knew, with a cold, crystal clarity, that I would never be safe in this house again. But as I stared at that file name, I also knew something else. She thought she had silenced me. She thought she had won because she could hit harder and scream louder. But I had the signal, and signal beats noise. Eventually, the morning sun that filtered through the thin curtains of my bedroom window felt like an insult. It was bright, cheerful, and completely at odds with the throbbing ache in my left cheek. I went to the mirror and inspected the damage. It was not a horror movie wound. It was subtle. There was a slight swelling along the jawline, a faint reddish-purple bruise blooming just beneath the skin where her ring had caught me. It was the kind of mark you could cover with a little extra foundation. It was the kind of mark people ignore. But I knew what it was. It was a signature. I did not cry. I felt cold, hollowed out, and strangely focused. I packed my laptop into my backpack. I checked the file path again. Vanessa. 01:47 a.m. It was there. It was safe. I walked out into the hallway. I could smell coffee and bacon. The normality of the smell made my stomach turn. How could there be bacon frying in a house where a girl was assaulted 8 hours ago? I walked into the kitchen. My father was sitting at the table, hunched over his coffee mug, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. Vanessa was at the stove. She was not wearing her usual crisp makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were rimmed with red. She looked exhausted. She looked like a martyr. She saw me enter and immediately turned to my father, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility. "David," she said, ignoring me completely. "I have been up all night sick over this. I know I raised my voice last night. I was just so frustrated. I am trying so hard to guide her, to help her become a responsible woman, and she pushes me away at every turn." She wiped a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. It was a masterful performance. "I know, Ness," my father murmured, rubbing his temples. "I know it is hard. You are doing your best." "I just feel like I am failing," she sobbed softly. "I want us to be a family, but she makes it impossible." I stood in the doorway, gripping the strap of my backpack. The injustice of it burned in my throat like acid. She was apologizing for raising her voice. She was rewriting the history of the night before the bruise on my face had even finished forming. "She did not just raise her voice," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. My father looked up. He saw the mark on my face. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and then he looked away. He looked at his coffee cup. He looked at the window. He looked anywhere but at me. "Morning, Cambria," he said, his voice heavy with warning. "Let us not start this again. Vanessa is upset. We are all tired." "She hit me," I said. I walked over to the table and set my laptop down. I did not sit. I stood over him, forcing him to acknowledge my presence. "She came into my room. She screamed at me, and she slapped me across the face. That is why I have a bruise, Dad." Vanessa gasped. She dropped the spatula into the pan with a clatter. "Oh my God," she whispered, turning to my father with wide, terrified eyes. "David, do you hear this? Now she is accusing me of abuse? I told you she would do this. I told you she hates me enough to say anything." "I never touched her," Vanessa cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I went into her room to ask for the rent money. Yes, we argued, but I never laid a hand on her. She probably did that to herself just to get you to kick me out." My father looked at me, his expression pleading. "Cambria, stop, please. Vanessa has never been violent. You are upset about the money. I get it. But this is too far." "You think I hit myself?" I asked. "You think I slammed my own face into a wall?" "I think you are dramatic," my father said, his voice hardening. "I think you want attention. And I think you are tearing this family apart because you cannot accept that I am happy with someone else." "I am not dramatic," I said. "I am an audio engineer." I opened the laptop. The screen glowed in the dim kitchen. "What is that?" Vanessa asked, her voice dropping. The fake tears stopped instantly. She saw the waveform on the screen. She knew exactly what it was. "I told you," I said, looking at my father. "I have a microphone under my bed. I record at night to catch sound effects. But last night, I caught a felony." "Turn it off," Vanessa snapped. She lunged forward, reaching for the laptop. I pulled it back out of her reach. "Dad, listen." I hit the space bar. The sound that filled the kitchen was not ambiguous. It was crystal clear. The quality of the USB mic was surprisingly good. First, there was the sound of the door slamming shut. Then, Vanessa's voice, sharp and cruel, cutting through the speaker. "You are a remnant, a leftover. You are in my way." My father froze. He stopped breathing. He stared at the laptop as if it were a bomb. Then came my voice, shaking, begging her to leave. And then, the undeniable sounds of the physical altercation, the scuffle of feet on the rug, my voice saying, "Move," Vanessa screaming, "Don't you touch me!" And then, the slap. Crack. It was loud. It was wet. It was followed immediately by the heavy thud of my body hitting the bed frame and my sharp intake of breath. Silence hung in the kitchen for 3 seconds. Then, the recording played Vanessa's voice again, breathless and cold. "You made me do that, since your father is too weak to do it." I hit pause. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The only sound was the bacon sizzling in the pan, burning, turning black and acrid. My father looked at Vanessa. His face was pale, the color of old ash. He looked at her hands, the same hands that massaged his shoulders, the same hands that were currently gripping the countertop until the knuckles were white. "You hit her," my father whispered. It was not a question. Vanessa's face went through a dozen contortions in a single second. Fear, rage, calculation. Then, she settled on hysteria. She collapsed onto the floor. She literally crumbled, grabbing her chest, sobbing with a violence that shook her whole body. "I didn't mean to," she wailed. "David, you have to understand. She cornered me. She pushed me. I was terrified. I flailed my arm out to protect myself. I didn't mean to hit her. It was an accident." She looked up at him, mascara running down her face, looking pathetic and small. "She set me up. David, don't you see? Who records their own bedroom? She planned this. She goaded me into a fight. She pushed me until I snapped, just so she could get it on tape. She is a monster. She is trying to destroy us." "You called me a remnant," I said quietly. "You called Dad weak." "I was angry," Vanessa screamed at me. "I say things when I am angry. Everyone does. But I cook for you. I clean for you. I treat you better than I treat my own son. And this is how you repay me? By spying on me in my own home?" She turned back to my father, crawling on her knees to grab his hand. "David, please, my blood pressure, my heart, I cannot take this. She is doing this to kill me." My father looked down at her. Then he looked at me. He looked at the bruise on my face. He looked at the laptop that held the truth. I waited. I waited for the anger. I waited for him to stand up, to tell her to get out, to protect his daughter. I waited for the man who used to fix radios with me to fix this. My father sighed. It was a long, rattling exhale that sounded like a tire losing all its air. He pulled his hand away from Vanessa, but he did not push her away. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Cambria," he said. His voice was very quiet. "Yes, Dad." "Delete it." I blinked. I thought I had misheard him. "What?" "Delete the file," he said, looking at the table, "and pack your things." The world stopped spinning. I felt like I was underwater. "Dad, she hit me. You heard it. She admitted it." "I heard a family fighting," he said, his voice trembling. "I heard 2 women who cannot get along. I heard a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed. A short, hysterical sound. "She assaulted me. If I take this to the police—" "You will not take it to the police!" He slammed his hand on the table. It was the first time he had raised his voice, and it was directed at me. "You will not drag our name through the mud. You will not have the police at my door. I am sick. Cambria, do you hear me? I am sick. I cannot deal with courts. I cannot deal with drama. She is abusing you too, I said, tears finally spilling over. She controls your money. She isolates you. Dad, please, wake up. She takes care of me, he shouted. Who is going to wash my clothes if she leaves? You? You are going to school. You are leaving anyway. Who is going to make sure I take my pills? Who is going to sit with me when the chest pains start? He looked at me with wet, desperate eyes. I need peace. Cammy, I am too old for this war. If you keep that recording, if you use it, you destroy my life. You leave me alone. So you choose her, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. You know she is lying. You know she hurt me, but you choose her because it is easier. I choose peace, he whispered. Just delete it, please, for me, if you love me. Delete it. Let us say it was a misunderstanding. Vanessa will apologize. We can start over. Vanessa was watching him. Her crying stopped. A look of triumph dawning in her eyes behind the mask of distress. She knew she had won. She knew that his fear of loneliness was stronger than his love for me. I reached out and closed the laptop. Okay, I said. My father let out a breath of relief. Thank you. Thank you, honey. I knew you would understand. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that you just sold your daughter for a nurse and a housekeeper. I picked up the laptop. I am leaving. I will be gone in an hour. You do not have to go, my father said weakly. We can work this out. No, I said. We can't. I walked back to my room. I did not slam the door. I moved with mechanical precision. I pulled my suitcase out of the closet. I threw in my clothes. I threw in the few books I cared about. I sat down at my desk one last time. I opened the laptop. I did not delete the file. I opened my cloud storage. I created a new folder. I named it System Backup Do Not Delete. I dragged the file Vanessa, 01:47 a.m. into the folder. I watched the progress bar. 10%, 50%, 100%. Uploaded. I right-clicked the file on my desktop and deleted it, emptying the trash bin just in case they checked. But the truth was already floating in the server farm somewhere in California. Safe from fire, safe from magnets, safe from my father's cowardice. I dismantled my setup. I unplugged the USB microphone. I coiled the cable neatly, just like my father had taught me when I was 12. I put the mic in my backpack, wrapped in a soft t-shirt. I looked around the room. The walls were bare where I had taken down my posters. The bed was stripped. The dust bunnies under the bed were the only witnesses left. I walked out to the living room. My father and Vanessa were sitting on the sofa. She had her arm around him. She was whispering something in his ear. They looked like a portrait of domestic stability, glued together by a shared lie. I am going, I said. My father stood up. He looked small. He looked like a stranger. Where will you go? He asked. Away, I said. Don't worry about it. You have your peace now. Cambria, he said, taking a half step toward me. You are angry. I get it. But when you cool down, remember that family is about forgiveness. You have to learn to forgive. Resentment is a poison. No, Dad, I said, looking him in the eye. Silence is the poison, and you just drank the whole bottle. I walked out the front door. The air outside was cold and crisp. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots, a sound I had recorded 1,000 times. I did not look back until I reached the street. Then, I turned and looked at the window of my old room. The curtains were drawn. It looked like a sleeping eye. They think it is over, I whispered to the wind. I touched the backpack where the microphone sat against my spine. If they want silence, I will give them silence. I promised. For now, but sound does not die. It just travels. And one day, it is going to echo back so loud it will shake the foundation of that house. I turned my back on 412 Maple Avenue and started walking toward the bus station. I had $40 in my pocket, a suitcase full of old clothes, and a digital bomb ticking in the cloud. I was homeless, but for the first time in 7 years, I was free. 7 years is a lifetime in the world of audio. In 7 years, technology leaps forward, formats change, and the fidelity of the world gets sharper. But for me, the last 7 years were measured not in sample rates, but in the distance I put between myself and Maple Ridge. I landed in Denver with a suitcase that smelled like old cedar and a bank account that hovered dangerously close to zero. I found an apartment that was barely larger than a walk-in closet, situated right next to the light rail tracks. Every 20 minutes, the walls would shake, and the rattle of the train would drown out my thoughts. Most people would have hated it. I loved it. It reminded me of the freight trains back home. But this time, the noise was mine. I paid for it. No one could tell me to turn it down. The first 2 years were a blur of caffeine and sleep deprivation. By day, I was a barista at a high-volume coffee shop downtown. I spent 8 hours a day steaming milk, burning my fingers, and smiling at customers who looked through me like I was a pane of glass. My hands, which wanted to be turning knobs on a mixing board, were busy wiping down counters and counting tips. But by night, I was an intern at the Echo Chamber, a small, gritty, independent podcast studio tucked away in a converted warehouse in the Arts District. I started at the bottom. I was the person who fetched the coffee, coiled the cables, and emptied the trash bins full of acoustic foam scraps. I did not care. I was in the room. I absorbed everything. I watched the senior producers cut tape, shape narratives, and manipulate silence. My break came, as most breaks do, because someone else messed up. A junior producer had recorded a high-profile interview with a witness for a true crime series, but they had forgotten to turn off the air conditioning unit in the background. The audio was unusable, drowned in a low-frequency hum that sounded like a dying generator. The host was furious. The interview could not be re-recorded. "It is trash," the studio manager said, rubbing his temples. "We have to scrap the episode." "I can fix it," I said. I was sweeping the floor at the time. They looked at me, the barista girl with the dark circles under her eyes. "It is buried in the noise floor. Cambria," the manager said dismissively. "You cannot EQ that out without making the voice look like a robot." "I use spectral repair," I said. "I can paint out the hum frequency by frequency. Give me 4 hours." They gave me the files because they had nothing to lose. I did not take 4 hours. I took 6. I sat in the smallest edit bay, wearing headphones that cost more than my car. And I went to work. I treated that audio file like a surgeon treating a trauma patient. I visualized the sound. I found the hum. I carved it out, slice by slice, preserving the texture of the human voice. When I played it back for them the next morning, the room went silent. The witness's voice was clear, intimate, and heartbreaking. The air conditioner was gone. "How did you do that?" the manager asked, staring at the waveform. "I listened to the things people try to ignore," I said. From that day on, I was no longer the intern. I was the tape savior. I became the go-to person for cleaning up the messiest, most hopeless audio files, bad phone connections, wind noise, microphone handling sounds. I fixed it all. I found a strange satisfaction in it. I could not fix the mess of my own family, so I fixed the world's audio. I scrubbed the static away until only the truth remained. By the time I was 23, I was a full-time producer. By 25, I was leading my own team. We specialized in complex, narrative-driven storytelling, true crime, investigative journalism, deep dives into toxic relationships. I had a knack for it. I understood the cadence of trauma. I knew exactly how long to hold a silence after a victim revealed a painful secret to make the listener lean in. I started making real money. I moved out of the apartment by the train tracks and bought a condo in a quiet neighborhood. It was small, but it had high ceilings and thick walls. I bought a car that did not break down when it rained. I bought clothes that were not from a thrift store. And I built my sanctuary. The second bedroom of my condo became a state-of-the-art home studio. I treated the walls with acoustic panels. I bought a Neumann microphone that cost $3,000. I bought Genelec monitors that revealed every flaw in a recording. It was a long way from the dusty space under my bed in Ohio. But I did not just work on other people's stories. I needed to let the pressure out of my own chest. I started a side project. It was an anonymous podcast called The Hidden Track. I used a voice modulator to lower my pitch slightly, just enough to be unrecognizable. In each episode, I told a story about a fictional family living in a small town. I talked about a stepmother who smiled with too many teeth. I talked about a father who slowly faded into the wallpaper. I talked about a girl who felt like a ghost in her own home. I never used real names. I never mentioned Maple Ridge, but the emotions were raw, bleeding cuts of reality. In the third episode, I said something that went viral on social media. I was talking about the night I left. I leaned into the mic, my voice steady and low, and said, "They tell you that family is blood, and blood is the strongest bond, but sometimes the only thing standing on your side is not a person. It is not your father. It is an audio file hidden under the bed. Sometimes the only witness who will not lie for peace is a machine." The response was overwhelming. Thousands of emails poured into the anonymous inbox. Women wrote to me about their own silent wars. They wrote about emotional abuse, about financial control, about being told they were crazy. They told me that my voice made them feel seen. I read every single email. They fueled me. They reminded me that I was not the unstable teenager Vanessa had painted me to be. I was a survivor, and I was successful. But despite all the success, despite the awards on my shelf and the money in my bank account, there was a shadow that I could not scrub out with spectral repair. I maintained a low-contact relationship with my father. It was a fragile, superficial thing. I sent him a text on his birthday. He sent me a text on Christmas. "Merry Christmas, Cammy. Hope you are well. We are good." That was it. No questions about my life. No, "I am proud of you." Just, "We are good." The "we" always included her. It was a constant reminder that they were a unit, and I was a satellite orbiting far outside their gravity. I told myself I did not care. I told myself I had won. I had escaped. I had built a life they could not touch. Then came the email that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, almost 7 years to the day since I had walked out of that house. I was in the middle of mixing a heavy segment about a cult survivor when my phone pinged. The subject line was dry and formal. "Estate planning update, David Holt." It was from a law firm in Ohio, not Mr. Kendrick, the old family lawyer, but a new firm, a bigger, more aggressive firm. I paused the playback on my screen. I took a sip of water. My heart started to hammer a familiar, anxious rhythm against my ribs. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Holt, we are writing to you on behalf of our client, David Holt, regarding the restructuring of his living trust and last will and testament. Due to Mr. Holt's declining cardiovascular health, he has elected to expedite the transfer of certain assets to ensure the stability of his primary caregiver and spouse, Vanessa Holt. Attached is a summary of the changes. Please note that while you remain a beneficiary of a fixed cash sum, the title to the property at 412 Maple Avenue, along with the adjacent parcels of land recently acquired, will be transferred immediately to Mrs. Holt to facilitate medical financing." I scanned the document. It was legalese, dense and boring, but the meaning was clear. They were moving the assets now. Before he died, they were making sure that even if he passed away tomorrow, the house was hers. But then, my eyes caught a paragraph at the bottom of the second page. It was a note explaining the rationale for the disproportionate distribution of assets. Note: client indicates that his adult daughter, Cambria Holt, has a history of instability and estrangement. Client notes that she voluntarily abandoned the family home 7 years ago and has shown no interest in the maintenance of the estate. Therefore, priority is given to the spouse who has remained the sole support system. The room spun. History of instability, voluntarily abandoned. It was not just about the money. I did not need their money. I could buy that house twice over with my savings now. It was the narrative. Even now, after 7 years, Vanessa was writing the story. She was putting it into legal documents. She was cementing the lie into the official record of my father's life. She was telling the law, the state, and history that I was the crazy one who ran away, and she was the saint who stayed. And my father had signed it. I looked at the date on the document. It had been signed 3 days ago. He had let her write that about me. Instability, after everything I had built, after I had pulled myself up from nothing, eating ramen and working 18-hour days to become a respected professional. He still saw me as the hysterical teenager who imagined things. He was not just protecting his peace anymore, he was actively participating in my defamation. I closed the email. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. It was not grief. It was not sadness. It was the cold precision of an engineer who has finally identified the source of the noise. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "You want to talk about history?" I spun my chair around to my main console. I had 3 monitors set up. I opened my file management system. I navigated to the cloud drive. I went to the folder that I had not opened in 7 years. System backup, do not delete. There it was, the file. Vanessa, 01:47 a.m. I dragged it into my professional audio software. The waveform appeared on the screen. It looked small compared to the massive multi-track sessions I usually worked with. It was a simple mono track, recorded on a cheap consumer microphone. I put on my headphones. These were not the cheap earbuds I had used back then. These were $3,000 reference headphones that revealed every nuance of sound. I hit play. I heard the wind rattling the window frame. I heard the low hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. The clarity was shocking. My skills were different now. I could hear things I hadn't noticed before. I could hear the heavy, jagged breathing of Vanessa before she even entered the room. I could hear the slur in her speech that hinted at the wine. And then, I heard the slap. On the professional monitors, it was visceral. It sounded like a gunshot. I listened to the whole thing. I listened to my father's voice the next morning, weak and pleading, asking me to delete it, asking me to choose his comfort over my safety. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blue line that represented the worst night of my life. For 7 years, I had kept this file as a shield. I kept it just in case she ever came after me. I kept it to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. But now they were coming for my name. They were coming for my reputation. They were trying to bury me under a pile of legal paperwork and lies. I reached for my phone. I looked at the calendar. I had vacation days saved up. I had money in the bank. I had a team who could run the studio without me for a week. I typed a reply to the lawyer. "Dear Mr. Kendrick, I will be in Maple Ridge on Friday to discuss these changes in person. Do not finalize any signatures until I arrive. I believe there is additional context regarding the estate that my father has forgotten, and I would like to remind him. Sincerely, Cambria Holt, Senior Producer." I hit send. Then I turned back to the waveform. I opened my plugin suite. I started to process the audio. I did not change the content. That would be illegal. I just cleaned it. I removed the hiss. I leveled the volume. I made Vanessa's voice sound as clear, sharp, and undeniable as if she were standing right there in the room. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Sound is old," I whispered to the screen. "But I am new, and this time, nobody is going to tell me to turn it down." I saved the enhanced file to my phone. I saved it to a thumb drive. I saved it to a secure server. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. I was going home, but I wasn't going back as the daughter who needed a place to sleep. I was going back as the producer, and I was about to direct the final episode of this family drama. The phone call was the first part of the performance. I sat in my high-rise condo in Denver, surrounded by $50,000 worth of audio equipment, and dialed my father's number. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump, dropping the pitch of my voice from the confident, commanding tone of a senior producer to the hesitant, slightly desperate timbre of a daughter who had lost her way. "Dad," I said when he picked up, "it is Cambria. I got the email. I I think I should come home, just to talk. I want to make sure everything is done right. I heard the hesitation on the other end, and then Vanessa's muffled voice in the background asking who it was. I am not coming to fight, I added quickly, injecting a note of defeat into my words. I just want to see you, and if the house is going to be transferred, I guess I should say goodbye to it. It was the bait they wanted. They wanted surrender. They wanted to see the prodigal daughter return with her tail between her legs, so they could feel benevolent about cutting her out of the will. Okay, Cammy, my father said, sounding relieved. Come home. We will make up the guest room for you. Actually, I said, can I stay in my old room? Just for a night or two? For old time's sake? There was a pause. I knew Vanessa was weighing the risk. But what risk was there? In their minds, I was broken. Sure, he said. Your old room is fine. I flew into Columbus 2 days later. I left my designer blazer and my Italian leather boots in Denver. I wore a pair of worn-out jeans, a hooded sweatshirt that had seen better days, and scuffed sneakers. I rented a modest sedan, parking it a block away so they would not see the rental agency stickers, and walked the rest of the way to the house with a battered suitcase I had bought at a thrift store specifically for this trip. I had to look like the failure Vanessa needed me to be. When I walked up the driveway of 412 Maple Avenue, the house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling slightly around the trim, a sign that despite Vanessa's claims of maintenance, money was being spent elsewhere. Vanessa opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a cashmere sweater and pearl earrings, looking every inch the lady of the manor. She scanned me from head to toe, her eyes lingering on my scuffed shoes. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. Cambria, she said, opening the door wide. You look like you have been traveling hard. It has been a long year, I lied. Stepping inside, the smell of the house was the same, that cloying artificial vanilla. Work is inconsistent, freelance audio stuff. You know how it is. I can imagine, she said, her tone dripping with faux sympathy. Well, come in. Your father is in the living room. Try not to upset him. He has had a rough week with his blood pressure. My father was sitting in his recliner. He looked frail. His skin was papery, and his hands shook as he reached out to take mine. Cammy, he whispered, you came. I came, Dad, I said, squeezing his hand. I felt a pang of genuine guilt seeing him like this, but I pushed it down. I needed to be cold. I needed to be an engineer, not a daughter. I just want to make sure you are okay, I said, looking at Vanessa. I saw the papers. It seems like a big change. It is necessary security, Vanessa interjected smoothly, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. With medical costs rising, we need to consolidate the assets. It is just paperwork. Cambria, it does not change how much he loves you. I understand, I said, lowering my eyes. I do not want to be left with nothing. Vanessa, if Dad goes, I do not have much of a safety net. It was the perfect thing to say. It confirmed her bias. She relaxed visibly. I was not a threat. I was a beggar. We will talk about all that with the lawyer, she said dismissively. Go get settled in your room. Dinner is at 6. My old room was exactly as I had left it 7 years ago, which was terrifying. The bed was in the same spot. The desk was empty. The stain on the rug where I had dropped a bottle of nail polish when I was 16 was still there. It was a museum of my trauma. But I was not the same exhibit. I closed the door and locked it. Then, I opened my battered suitcase. Underneath the pile of cheap flannel shirts was a hard-shell Pelican case. I popped the latches. Inside lay $10,000 worth of surveillance equipment. This was not the amateur USB microphone I had used as a teenager. These were professional-grade, wireless lavalier microphones and tiny high-fidelity transmitters used for undercover journalism. They were smaller than a matchbox and had a battery life of 48 hours. I went to work. I moved with the efficiency of a ghost. I waited until I heard the television go on in the living room. A game show. volume turned up high to accommodate my father's failing hearing. I slipped into the kitchen while Vanessa was in the garage getting a bottle of wine. I attached a magnetic microphone to the back of the refrigerator, right near the breakfast nook where they had their morning coffee. It was invisible unless you pulled the appliance out from the wall. I moved to the living room. While pretending to admire a new vase on the bookshelf, I dropped a tiny transmitter into the dense foliage of a fake fern. It was perfectly positioned to pick up conversations from the sofa. Finally, I returned to my room. I slid the last microphone under my bed. I taped it to the slat of the frame, just like I had done 7 years ago. But this time, it was not wired to a laptop. It was transmitting an encrypted signal directly to a secure cloud server via a dedicated mobile hotspot I had hidden in my suitcase. I was not just recording a room, I was wiring the house. Over the next 2 days, I played the role of the submissive, defeated stepdaughter to perfection. I slept late. I moped around the house. I asked Vanessa if she needed help with dinner, and when she criticized my chopping technique, I apologized and let her take over. "You really have not changed much, have you?" she said one afternoon, watching me struggle to fold a fitted sheet, a struggle I faked completely. Still a bit helpless. "I guess I never learned the domestic stuff," I said quietly. "Well, it is a good thing this house will be in capable hands," she said, snatching the sheet from me. "Leo is going to need a lot of support when he goes to college. We have to think about the future of the siblings who actually have potential." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, but I said nothing. I just went back to my room, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and opened the app on my phone. The audio feeds were crystal clear. I heard everything. I heard Vanessa on the phone with her friend while my father was napping. Vanessa: "Oh, she is pathetic. She showed up looking like she lives in a dumpster. I think she came back hoping David would hand her a check, but I shut that down. I told the lawyer to make the love token payment as small as legally possible. $5,000 is too generous if you ask me." I heard her talking to my father in the bedroom at night, her voice dropping to that manipulative whisper I remembered so well. Vanessa: "David, you have to be firm with the lawyer tomorrow. If we leave any loopholes, she will try to sue the estate later. You know how greedy she gets. We have to protect Leo. This house should really go to Leo eventually. Don't you think? Cambria has had her chance at life and she squandered it." David: "She is my daughter, Ness. I cannot just cut her out completely." Vanessa: "You aren't cutting her out. You are protecting her from herself. If you give her money, she will just waste it on nonsense. We are doing her a favor." It was gold. It was pure, unadulterated evidence of undue influence. She was isolating him, disparaging me to manipulate his estate planning, and actively plotting to divert assets to her biological son under false pretenses. But the real smoking gun came on the 3rd day. I was sitting on the front porch, pretending to read a book, when Mrs. Gable from next door came over. Mrs. Gable had always been Vanessa's biggest ally, the town gossip who spread the story of my instability. "It is so good of you to let her come back," Mrs. Gable said. I checked my phone. The microphone in the living room was hot. The window was open. Vanessa: "I try to be a Christian about it, Susan, but honestly, it is exhausting. David is so confused lately. I have had to guide his hand on every document. He does not even know what day it is half the time. I just tell him where to sign so we can ensure the assets don't get drained by outside parties." Mrs. Gable: "You are a saint, Vanessa, a saint." Vanessa: "I just need to get this deed transfer done tomorrow. Once the house is in my name, I can finally relax. I might even move David into that assisted living facility in Canton. They have great memory care. It would be so much easier than managing him here." I froze. The text on my screen transcribed the audio in real time. Move David into that assisted living facility. She was planning to dump him. She was going to take the house, claim he was too difficult to manage, and ship him off to a home the moment the ink was dry. I saved the clip. I backed it up to 3 different servers. I sent a copy to my lawyer in Denver. I sent a copy to a friend of mine who worked in elder law in Columbus. Got it, my lawyer texted back 3 minutes later. This is textbook exploitation. Do not let him sign anything. That evening, we sat down for dinner. The mood was tense. Mr. Kendrick, the lawyer, was coming the next morning at 10 o'clock to finalize the signing. So, I said, pushing a pea around my plate, tomorrow is the big day. It is just a formality, Vanessa said, pouring herself a large glass of wine. She seemed giddy, almost vibrating with anticipation. I was thinking, I said slowly, adopting a tone of confusion. I read the draft again. There is a lot of language in there I do not really get. Legalese, you know? Mr. Kendrick will explain it, my father mumbled. He looked terrible, pale and shaky. Vanessa had been dosing him heavily with his calming meds. Right, I said, but I want to be sure we are all protected, especially Dad. I mean, if the house goes to you, Vanessa, and something happens to Dad, what happens to his care? Does the deed guarantee he stays here? Vanessa's fork scraped screechingly against her plate. Of course he stays here. I am his wife. Why would you even ask that? I don't know, I shrugged, looking her dead in the eye for the first time. I just want to make sure everything is transparent. Actually, I was thinking we should maybe record the meeting tomorrow, just for our records, since Dad's memory is, you know. Vanessa laughed nervously. Recorded? That is ridiculous. Lawyers keep records. I think it is a good idea, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. In fact, I think we should review everything very carefully. I would hate for there to be any misunderstandings, like the last time I was here. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. She sensed a shift. The meek, broken girl was suddenly speaking in complete sentences. You are overstepping, Cambria, she warned. You are a guest here. I am his daughter, I said, and I am just looking out for his best interests. Surely you want that too. Unless there is some reason you do not want a record of what is being promised. I have nothing to hide, she snapped. Good, I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has already locked the cage door. Then tomorrow should be easy. After dinner, I went back to my room. I could hear them arguing in the bedroom. Vanessa was hissing about my attitude. My father was groaning, saying he just wanted to sleep. I locked my door. I sat on the floor, pulling the pelican case out from under the bed. I checked the feeds one last time. Every word of their argument was being captured, tagged, and stored. I lay down on the bed, the same twin mattress I had cried on when I was 19. I stared at the ceiling. I reached down and felt the cold metal of the transmitter taped to the frame. 7 years ago, I was a scared kid hoping to catch a whisper of truth to save my sanity. Now, I was a surveillance expert building a cage of sound around the woman who had tried to erase me. You should have checked the room, Vanessa, I whispered to the darkness. You should have checked the bed. I pulled up the file labeled Vanessa. 01:47 a.m. On my phone. I looked at it next to the new file recording right now. Vanessa, the plan. Years ago, this mic saved me alone, I whispered in the dark. This time, it will save the whole house. I closed my eyes and listened to the house breathing. It was not scary anymore. It was just data. And I had terabytes of it. The living room was staged for a performance. Vanessa had arranged the chairs in a semicircle, facing the coffee table where the legal documents lay like a centerpiece. She had put out a tray of tea and store-bought cookies, trying to frame this asset transfer as a casual family gathering rather than a legal execution. Mr. Kendrick, the lawyer, sat on the sofa with his briefcase open. My father sat next to him, looking small and washed out in his gray cardigan. Vanessa hovered behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder, a physical reminder of who was actually in charge. Across from them sat Mrs. Gable and Mr. Henderson, the neighbors who had been invited to serve as witnesses. They looked uncomfortable, balancing teacups on their knees, making small talk about the weather. I sat in the armchair in the corner. I was the only one not drinking tea. I was checking my phone. The battery was at 98%. The the Bluetooth connection was active. "All right," Mr. Kendrick said, clearing his throat. "If we are all ready, we can proceed with the signing. David, as we discussed, this updates your living trust to transfer the title of the property at 412 Maple Avenue to Vanessa Holt immediately. It also consolidates the primary savings accounts into her name for ease of management." My father nodded vaguely. "Yes, for management." "And regarding Cambria," Mr. Kendrick continued, glancing at me briefly without making eye contact, "the updated will stipulates a one-time bequest of $5,000. The remainder of the estate, including the land parcels and personal property, will pass to Vanessa and subsequently to her biological issue." $5,000. It was an insult designed to be a slap in the face. It was exactly what Vanessa had lobbied for. "If everyone is in agreement," Mr. Kendrick said, uncapping his expensive fountain pen and handing it to my father, "you just need to sign here. David." My father's hand shook as he took the pen. He looked at the paper, blinking as if the words were swimming before his eyes. He looked tired. He looked like a man who just wanted to close his eyes and let the world happen to him. "Wait," I said. It was a quiet word, but it stopped the room cold. "Cambria," Vanessa sighed, her voice tight with warning. "Please, do not make a scene. We have guests." "I am not making a scene," I said, standing up slowly. I kept my hands clasped in front of me, projecting a calm I did not feel. "I just want to say something before Dad signs his name. I think, given that I am being written out of the family history today, I am allowed a closing statement." "This is not a trial. Cambria," Mr. Kendrick said impatiently. "Isn't it?" I looked at my father. "Dad, 7 years ago, I left this house with a backpack and $40. You were told that I ran away because I was unstable. You were told I abandoned you. I went to Denver. I worked 2 jobs. I built a career. I own my own home now. I have a studio. I have a life." I took a step closer to the coffee table. "I do not need your money. I do not need the $5,000. You can keep it, but what I need, and what I came back for, is the truth." Vanessa stepped out from behind the sofa. Her face was flushing pink. "Oh, for God's sake. Here we go again. The truth? The truth is that you were a difficult, jealous teenager who could not handle that your father found happiness again. You made up stories then, and you are making up stories now." She turned to the neighbors, her eyes wide and pleading. "She used to tell people I beat her," Vanessa said, shaking her head in disbelief. "Can you imagine? Me? She even claimed she had recordings. She has always been a liar, creating drama to get attention." "I did have recordings," I said. "You had manipulated noise," Vanessa snapped. "You work in audio, right? Everyone knows you can fake anything on a computer these days. You probably edited your own voice screaming just to hurt me." "That is an interesting theory," I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "But sound has a fingerprint, Vanessa, and the thing about truth is that it resonates." I looked at the sleek, modern soundbar that sat under the television. It was a high-end system Vanessa had bought last Christmas to impress the neighbors. "Nice speakers," I said. "Bluetooth enabled, right?" I tapped my screen. A small chime echoed through the room as my phone connected to the house system. "What are you doing?" Mr. Kendrick asked, frowning. "I am playing a memory," I said. "Dad, before you sign that paper, before you give her everything because you think she's your savior, I want you to listen to the night I left, the night you have tried so hard to forget." "Cambria, stop it!" Vanessa lunged for the remote control on the coffee table, trying to mute the system. But I had already hit play. The sound of a slamming door exploded into the room, amplified by the subwoofer. It made Mrs. Gable jump in her seat. Then came Vanessa's voice, 7 years younger, but unmistakable in its cruelty. "Get out! Get out of my room!" My father froze. The pen hovered over the paper. The recording played on, the argument, the insults. "You are a remnant, a leftover," and then the slap. It sounded hideous on the big speakers. The wet, sharp crack of impact reverberated off the walls. Then the thud of my body hitting the floor, the gasps of pain. Vanessa stood frozen, her hand hovering over the mute button, her face pale. "This is fake," she whispered. "She made this." But then came the part she had forgotten, the part everyone had forgotten. On the recording, a door down the hall opened. Footsteps approached. Heavy, tired footsteps. My father's voice came through the speakers. "What is going on? Why is there so much noise?" The room went deathly silent. My father, the real one sitting on the sofa, turned his head slowly toward the speakers. His eyes were wide with horror. On the recording, Vanessa's voice shifted instantly from rage to panic. "Nothing. David." She slipped. She fell against the bed. "She is just being dramatic." And then, my voice, young and terrified. "She hit me. Dad. She slapped me. Look at my face." There was a pause in the recording, a long, agonizing silence where the 19-year-old me waited for salvation. Then, my father's recorded voice spoke. "Vanessa, is everyone okay?" "We are fine. David, go back to bed. You need your rest." "Okay, just keep it down. I have work tomorrow. Don't make a big deal out of it. Cambria." Then the sound of his bedroom door closing. I stopped the playback. The silence in the living room was heavier than lead. Mrs. Gable was staring at my father with her mouth slightly open. Mr. Henderson looked at his shoes. Mr. Kendrick had capped his pen and pushed the papers away slightly. "You knew," I said, looking directly at my father. He was trembling. His face was the color of old ash. He could not look at me. "You told everyone you didn't know," I continued, my voice steady. "You told the neighbors I was lying. You told yourself it never happened, but you walked into the hallway, you saw me on the floor, you heard me beg, and you told me to keep it down because you had work in the morning." That is not me," my father whispered, his voice cracking. "I was medicated. I was asleep." "That is your voice, David," Mrs. Gable said softly. It was the first time she had spoken. She looked at Vanessa, then back at David. "That is your voice." Vanessa rallied. She straightened her spine, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an exit. "It is a fake," she shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She doctored it. She works in Hollywood or wherever. She can make anyone say anything. You cannot believe a digital file over your own wife." "I work in news and documentary production," I corrected her. "And that file has metadata embedded in it from 7 years ago. It has been stored on a secure cloud server with a chain of custody that proves it has never been altered. I have already had it verified by a forensic audio specialist in Denver." "Lies," Vanessa screamed. "It is all lies. She is trying to steal the inheritance." "You want to talk about stealing?" I asked. "Let us listen to something a little more recent. Let us listen to something from this week." I tapped the screen again. "No!" Vanessa shrieked, lunging toward the soundbar to pull the plug. But the audio was already playing. It was the sound of wind chimes and birds. The front porch. "Vanessa. Oh, she is pathetic. She showed up looking like she lives in a dumpster. I told the lawyer to make the love token payment as small as legally possible." Mrs. Gable gasped. She recognized the conversation. She recognized her own silence on the tape. Then the audio cut to the kitchen, recorded just yesterday. The sound of the refrigerator hum was low in the background. Vanessa. "David, you have to be firm. This house should really go to Leo eventually. Cambria squandered her life." And then, the final clip, the one I had recorded from the bedroom while I stood in the hallway with my boom mic, the one that would end her. It was Vanessa talking to her friend on the phone, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Vanessa, once the deed is in my name, I can finally relax. I might even move David into that assisted living facility in Canton. They have great memory care. It would be so much easier than managing him here. I mean, I love him, but I'm still young. I cannot be a nurse forever. If I have to crush a few more pills into his dinner to keep him docile until the signing, so be it. The recording ended. I did not need to say anything. The room was frozen. Mr. Kendrick stood up abruptly. He gathered the papers from the table and shoved them into his briefcase. I cannot be a party to this, he said, his voice shaking with professional terror. If there is any suggestion of medical tampering or undue influence, these proceedings are suspended immediately. It was a joke, Vanessa cried, her face wild. She grabbed Mr. Kendrick's arm. I was venting. It was a joke. I never crushed pills. I take care of him. Mr. Kendrick pulled his arm away as if she were burning him. Do not touch me, Mrs. Holt. My father sat on the sofa. He was not moving. He was staring at Vanessa. Docile? He whispered. Vanessa turned to him. David, baby. No, you know me. I love you. She is twisting everything. It is out of context. You said you would move me, my father said. His voice was stronger now. The shock was burning off the fog of the medication. You said you would put me in a home. I was stressed, Vanessa sobbed, falling to her knees in front of him. I was just talking. I would never do it. Please, David, look at what she is doing. She is destroying us. No, Mrs. Gable said, standing up. Her face was hard. She is saving him. Mrs. Gable looked at me and nodded once. It was an apology. It was an acknowledgement. I looked at my father. He looked old. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had built his house on sand and was watching the tide come in. The pen had rolled off the table and lay on the carpet. Useless. You have heard it all now, Dad, I said. The past, the present, and her plan for your future. I walked over and unplugged my phone from the system. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. I did not come back for the money, I said. I have enough money. I came back because I knew you were walking into a trap. I came back to pay a debt to the 19-year-old girl you left on the floor. My father looked up at me. Tears were streaming down his face, tracking through the deep lines of his cheeks. I didn't know, he sobbed. I swear, Cammy, I didn't know it was this bad. You knew enough, I said. You heard the slap 7 years ago. You heard me begging. You chose to go back to sleep because it was easier than fighting her. You chose your peace over my safety. He flinched as if I had hit him. But I am not asking for an apology, I said. It is too late for that. I am asking you a practical question. I gestured to the stunned neighbors, the fleeing lawyer, and the woman sobbing on the floor who had just admitted to drugging him. You can't say you didn't hear it this time. The whole room heard it. The neighbors heard it. The lawyer heard it. I leaned down until my face was level with his. So, Dad, what are you going to do, now that the whole town knows exactly what happens in this house when the doors are closed? The silence that followed my question was not the empty, passive silence I had grown up with in this house. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that precedes a structural collapse. The air in the room felt charged with static, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting to see who would break first. Mr. Kendrick was the first to move. He did not look at Vanessa. He did not look at my father. He snapped the latches of his leather briefcase shut with a decisive metallic click that sounded like a gavel striking a block. I am terminating this meeting, Mr. Kendrick announced, his voice tight with the fear of disbarment. I am also sealing these documents, under the circumstances, and given the audio evidence suggesting potential medical interference and coercion, I cannot in good conscience allow Mr. Holt to sign any legal instruments regarding his estate. You cannot do that, Vanessa screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. You work for us. You cannot just walk out. Actually, Mrs. Holt, I work for David, Mr. Kendrick corrected her, standing up and smoothing his suit jacket. And right now, it appears my client may be under duress. I will be filing a motion to freeze the estate assets pending a competency evaluation and a full medical review. Medical review? Vanessa looked like she was going to be sick. She knew exactly what a toxicology screen would find in my father's blood. "I am calling the police," she shrieked, pivoting to a new tactic. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is trespassing. She wiretapped this house. That is illegal. I want her arrested." "Go ahead. Call them," I said calmly. I did not move from my spot. "But before you dial, you should know that I have already forwarded every file, the one from 7 years ago and the ones from this week, to a forensic attorney in Denver. I also sent them to the local Adult Protective Services office this morning." Vanessa froze. Her phone hung loosely in her hand. "This is not just a family dispute anymore, Vanessa," I continued, my voice steady and cold. "This is an open investigation into elder abuse and financial exploitation. If the police come here, they are not coming to arrest me for recording in a house where I am a registered resident guest. They are coming to ask you why you talked about crushing pills into my father's food." The color drained from her face so completely that she looked like a wax figure. She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. The fight had left her. She realized, perhaps for the first time in her life, that she could not manipulate her way out of hard data. Then, a sound came from the other end of the sofa, a low, broken sound. My father was crying. It was not the quiet, dignified weeping of a martyr. It was the ugly, gasping sobs of a man who has realized he has wasted the last decade of his life on a lie. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, covering his face with his shaking hands. "I heard it," he choked out. The room turned to him. "What did you say, David?" Mrs. Gable asked softly. My father lowered his hands. His eyes were red and swollen, but they were clear. For the first time in years, he was looking at me, really looking at me, without the filter of Vanessa's narrative. "I heard it," he repeated, looking at me. "That night, 7 years ago, I wasn't asleep. The sleeping pill hadn't kicked in yet. I heard you screaming. I heard the slap. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like a rib snapping. I had suspected it. The recording had hinted at it, but hearing him admit it was a different kind of agony. "Why?" I whispered. "Why didn't you open the door?" "Because I was scared," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I was so scared of being alone again. Cammy, after your mom died, the silence in this house was eating me alive. I felt like I was drowning every single day. And then Vanessa came, and she made noise. She made dinner. She filled the empty space." He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, looking like a ashamed child. "When I heard her hit you, I knew. I knew I had made a mistake. I knew she wasn't who she pretended to be. But I was a coward. I thought if I ignored it, if I just made you apologize, we could go back to normal. I thought I could keep my peace if I just sacrificed yours." "You sacrificed me," I said. "You didn't just sacrifice my peace. You sacrificed me." "I know," he sobbed. "And I have hated myself for it every day since you left. That is why I let her take control. I felt like I deserved it. I felt like I deserved to be miserable because I failed you." He looked at Vanessa, who was staring at the floor, refusing to meet his eyes. "But I will not let her kill me," he said, his voice gaining a sudden, surprising strength. "And I will not let her take what belongs to you." He stood up. He was shaky, but he was standing on his own 2 feet. "Mr. Kendrick," my father said, "do not file the transfer. Tear it up, and I want a new power of attorney drawn up, immediately." "Of course, David," Mr. Kendrick said. "Who would you like to appoint?" "My daughter," he said. "Cambria." Vanessa's head snapped up. "You cannot be serious. She hates you." "She does not hate me," my father said sadly. "She saved me, even after I threw her away." I looked at him. Part of me, the little girl who used to help him fix radios, wanted to run across the room and hug him. I wanted to tell him it was okay. But I was not that little girl anymore. I was a 33-year-old woman who knew that forgiveness without boundaries is just permission to be hurt again. "I accept the power of attorney," I said, my voice professional. "But things are going to change. Dad, I am not moving back in here to be a nurse. I am not going to be your servant. I know, he said. I am going to hire professional caregivers. I listed. I am going to have an independent accountant audit every cent that has been spent in the last 5 years. And I am going to take you to a doctor who is not on Vanessa's payroll. Okay, he nodded. Okay. And one more thing, I said, turning to Vanessa. She shrank back against the cushions. You have 24 hours to leave, I said. This is my house, she spat, though the venom was weak. I have rights. I have squatters' rights. You have to evict me. Actually, Mrs. Gable spoke up from her chair. I saw you pack a bag this morning. Vanessa, you told me you were taking some of your jewelry and furs to your sister's house for safekeeping because you didn't trust the movers. Sounds like you have already established residence elsewhere. Vanessa glared at the neighbor she had thought was her ally. Besides, I added, checking my phone again, the Adult Protective Services caseworker just texted me. She's on her way over with a police escort to do a wellness check. Do you really want to be here when they arrive? Do you want them to look in your purse? Do you want them to check the medicine cabinet? Vanessa stood up. She looked at the room, at the husband she had drugged, at the neighbors she had fooled, and at the stepdaughter she had underestimated. She realized the game was over. The narrative she had carefully constructed for a decade had been dismantled by a few megabytes of data. You are all ungrateful, she hissed, grabbing her purse. I gave up the best years of my life for this miserable family. And you got paid for it, I said. We will be checking the bank accounts. Vanessa, don't spend anything you can't account for. She stormed out of the room. A moment later, the front door slammed, a sound I had heard 1,000 times, but this time, it sounded like a liberation. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics and restructuring. I did not return to Denver immediately. I took a leave of absence from the studio and set up a temporary command center in the dining room of the Maple Ridge house. The first thing I did was hire a reputable nursing agency, 2 nurses, kind and professional women who smelled like soap and not vanilla perfume, came in to manage my father's medication and diet. Within a week, the gray pallor left his skin. The tremors in his hands stopped. He started reading the newspaper again. He started looking like the man I remembered. The legal battle with Vanessa was short and brutal. Faced with the audio evidence and the threat of criminal charges for elder abuse, she agreed to a settlement that stripped her of any claim to the house or the remaining savings. She took her car, her clothes, and she disappeared to a town 3 hours south. We never heard from her again. I did not stay in the house. I could not. There were too many ghosts in the walls. But I did not sell it, either. My father and I sat on the front porch one evening, watching the sun go down over the neighborhood. I cannot live here alone, Cammie, he said, and I know you have a life in Denver. You should go back to it. You earned it. I know, I said, but I have an idea. I told him about the emails I'd received over the years. I told him about the women who wrote to me, trapped in houses just like this one, silenced by partners or parents who told them they were crazy. This house has good bones, I said. It just has a bad memory. We can fix that. We can rewire it. 6 months later, 4 and 12 Maple Avenue reopened its doors. It was not a private residence anymore. We converted it into a transitional safe house for women escaping domestic abuse, specifically psychological and financial abuse. It was a small operation, housing only 4 women at a time, but it offered them legal counsel, financial planning, and a safe place to land. And in the back bedroom, my old room, I built a studio. It was soundproofed, it had professional lighting, and on the desk sat a high-quality microphone, connected to a secure server. Any woman who stayed in the house could go in there, close the door, and tell her story. She could record her truth, anonymously, and leave it there, a library of voices, a testament that they existed. On the day we opened, my father walked into the studio. He looked around at the acoustic foam, at the heavy curtains, at the on-air light above the door. He walked over to the desk. He ran his hand over the microphone stand. "You still kept it?" he asked. He was looking at the battered old USB microphone I had set up on a shelf as a display piece, the same one I had hidden under my bed all those years ago. "Yeah," I said, standing in the doorway. "I keep it to remember." "Remember what?" he asked, turning to me. "That silence is not peace," I said. "Silence is just a void. You have to fill it with something true, or someone else will fill it with lies." My father nodded. He touched the microphone one last time, as if apologizing to it. "I am sorry I made you wait 7 years to hit play," he said. "It is okay, Dad," I said. "The signal didn't fade." I left him there and went to sit in the chair behind the mixing desk. I put on my headphones. I looked at the waveform on the screen, the jagged, beautiful lines of a new story waiting to be told. I leaned into the mic. "If anyone out there is listening," I said, my voice clear and strong, broadcasting to the thousands of subscribers on my feed. "If you have ever been told that you are imagining things, or that you are too sensitive, or that you should just keep the peace, I want you to know something. You are the recording device of your own life. You have the right to your own memory." I paused, looking at the red light that told me the world was listening. They can hide the bruises, they can hide the money, they can even hide the truth for a while, but they cannot hide the sound. So keep recording, keep listening, and when the time is right, do not be afraid to break the silence, because the moment you press play, you are not just a victim anymore, you are the narrator. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Cambria's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can get these stories heard by even more people.